Okay, let's talk about solving this equation here. And specifically, we want to talk about what are the first steps. Like, matter of fact, what is the first step you need to do to solve this equation? So this is going to be applicable to any of you out there that are studying algebra. So you could be in an Algebra 1 course, a college algebra course, an introductory to algebra course. Or you can be some other kind of course description like Math 123. If you're doing algebra, part of your course, you're going to need to know this. Now, what are we talking about here? Well, we are talking about equations. And in algebra, there's different type of equations, but this little thing right here, right there, is a clue, okay? So I'll give you a little bit of a hint. It starts with the Q, okay? What type of equation are we dealing with here? It starts with a Q. Drum roll, please. Okay, here is the answer. This is a quadratic equation, okay? So we're talking about quadratic equations, and now if you are still lost, then you're definitely going to want to watch the rest of this video, but we're going to be solving this particular quadratic equations, and when you solve quadratic equations, there are some specific first things you need to do, especially when the equation that we're looking at is in this kind of form. Okay, so we're going to talk about that because think about it. What steps you take, your initial steps, is like what path you're going to be taking, like what road you're going to go on. So if here you are right there and you're like, okay, what's the first thing I do? Well, if you get on the right road, okay, like, okay, you do the right first step and then you can take the right second step and you're on a right third step, well, then you're going to go, eventually you're going to get to the solution. Now, if you take the wrong road, okay, guess what? You're going to take the wrong first step, and then you're going to take the wrong second step, and then you're going to end up in the land of confusion and wrong answers. So we don't want that to happen. So we're going to talk about things that you want to be really aware about when you're dealing with quadratic equations, something like this. And we're going to get to this in just 1 second. But first, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is John. I'm the founder of TabletClass Math. I'm also a middle and high school math teacher. And over several years, I've constructed what I like to believe is one of the best online math help programs there is. Of course, I'll let you be the judge of that. If you're interested, you can check out my math help program by following the link in the description of this video. But basically, I have 100 plus different math courses ranging from pre-algebra, algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2. I'm going to be launching pre-calculus here shortly. But I also have a lot of courses in the area of test preparation. So if you're studying for the GED, HiSET, TASC, SAT, ACT, GRE, GMAT, ASVAB, AccuPlacer, ALEX exam, CLEP exam, maybe a teacher certification exam, all those exams, maybe a nursing entrance school exam. All those exams have math on them, and if you don't do well in the math section, you don't do well on the exam. So let me help you prepare. Just go to my website, check out my full course catalog. I should have your exam. Now, if I do not, drop me a line and I'll help you out the best I can. I also do a lot with independent learners like homeschoolers. So if you homeschool, I have a great homeschool learning system. And I obviously help those of you that are just having a tough time in your current math courses. Now, if you are serious about wanting to do better in math, okay, if you're not serious, just disregard this part of the video. But if you truly are serious and motivated to want to get better at math and overcome your math struggles, then you got to be serious about this, and that is note taking. Okay, so over decades of teaching mathematics, one thing is apparent to me: those students who take great math notes almost always end up looking like this at the end of the school year. And the reverse is true. Those students who were like me way back in the 1980s, what was I doing back there? Well, I was taking notes, but they had nothing to do with math. I was like writing to my buddies, hey, what are we doing this weekend? We didn't have any cell phones or texting and all that stuff. We just literally try to do whatever we could to not get caught by the teacher. Because back in those days, they would throw us in detention. I spent a lot of time in detention. But at the end of the year, what kind of grades did I get? I would get like C minuses, and I would look like this. I would be like, why did I get this grade? Obviously I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. So take a hard look at your notes. That's a good reflection of how much work you're putting into your course, but it's really a reflection of your level of focus. Okay, if you cannot focus, you cannot be successful in anything you do in life, right? And math is no exception. Now, in the meantime, you probably missed a lot of material that you still need to know. So I offer detailed comprehensive math notes you can use. to include pre-algebra, algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2, and trigonometry. You can find the links to those notes in the description of this video. All right, so here is our lovely quadratic equation. That's what this is. What do we do? Okay, now if you think you can solve this problem, I would certainly encourage you to pause the video and go ahead and solve this. If you know what you're doing, you can solve this within, I don't know, 120 seconds, all right, 2 minutes. So this is not that difficult of a problem. But if you're not quite sure, I'm going to show you what to do right now. Okay, so if you don't want to see the solution, go ahead and pause the video. But let's just very quickly talk about quadratic equations and some of our options. Okay, so depending on the way this quadratic equation is laid out, and I don't want to turn this into a full lesson on solving all quadratic equations because there's different types or there's different forms. Okay, sometimes you can take the square root of both sides. Sometimes you can factor. All right. Now, when you can't factor or take the square root of both sides, then we have to go use some additional techniques to include the quadratic formula. Okay, this is our fallback technique. And then there's another technique called completing the square, which is like the long version of the quadratic formula. So in general, this is what your options are when you're dealing with quadratic formulas. But one thing you need to know is that there are always two solutions when you're dealing with the quadratic formula. So anytime you're dealing with an x squared, really a quadratic formula by definition is a polynomial to degree 2. So it is in fact a polynomial and its highest power is 2. So, you got to know this stuff, right? You just can't be like, oh, I do this, I do that. You can't learn math by just memorization. You got to actually know the concepts a little bit. So this is a quick overview of quadratic equations in general. Now let's get to our problem and talk about that first step. Like, what's the first thing we need to do? Well, here's our problem. The first thing we need to do, okay, because this is not a situation where I can take the square root of both sides of the equation. All right, so here's a quadratic equation where I could just simply take the square root of both sides of the equation. I can't do that because I have this x term. So I can't do that here. So this is not one of these scenarios. So I'm like, okay, I recognize I cannot do this. So what is the first thing I need to do? Well, the first thing you need to do is you got to set this equation equal to 0. Okay, so that's the first thing you always do in quadratic equations. Unless you can take the square root of both sides, you're going to have to move whatever terms you have over on this side to the left-hand side and have this in standard form. Okay, you set it equal to 0. So really, that's kind of like two things as part of the first step, right? So the first thing you want to do is set that thing equal to 0 and then make sure it's in standard form, which it means that it's highest to lowest power. Okay, so notice here I have my x squared, my x, and my number. That's the first thing you want to do, unless, again, you can take the square root of both sides of an equation. So like this is a quadratic equation. I simply take the square root, x is equal to positive and negative 4, and I'm done. All right. Unfortunately for you, this is not that easy. Okay. All right. So that's the first thing. Now, what's the second thing? Well, the second thing, you can see I'm already doing a quadratic formula here, but the second thing would be to try to factor. Once you're here, once you have this lovely trinomial, try to factor it. Okay. So in other words, you're going to want to try to see if you can factor this thing into two binomials where it's that set equal to 0. Well, of course, you need to know a little bit about factoring, and that's a typical weak area for algebra students. So that's what you want to try to do, okay? So you want to attempt to factor this, all right? So that's the second thing. Anytime you have a trinomial, your brain needs to be like, all right, can I factor this, and try to factor it. Now, if you are struggling with factoring trinomials, I have tons of videos on my YouTube channel about factoring. You want to check those out, or you might want to just, enroll in my Algebra 1 course, and you'll just be like a total expert in this. But anyways, so that's the second thing. So the first thing, set this thing equal to 0. That's the first thing, right? Then the second thing is to try to factor this. Now, unfortunately for us, this guy right here cannot be factored. We can't factor this into two binomials. So, we're like, oh, bummer. What do I have to do? Well, you're going to have to break out the good old quadratic formula. Here it is right here in all its glory. This is one of these things you want to put into your long-term memory, okay? It's that important. So you should know this, but if you don't know this, here is the formula, but we need to know how to use it. So what's in the formula? We got A's, we got a C, and we got some B's here. So what are A, B, C's? Well, A is the coefficient of that leading term, okay, what we call the leading coefficient. So whatever is in front of the x squared, in this case it's a positive 1, that's what A is equal to. What is it? Whatever is in front of the x term, in this case it's negative 1, that's what B is equal to, and then our little number by itself, that's what C is equal to. So C is negative 1, B is negative 1, and A is 1, okay? So now we plug in those respective A, B, C values into the quadratic formula, and you can see here A is 1, so that's going to be right there for my 1, and then B is negative 1. You've got to be very, very careful here. B is negative 1, so the formula is minus B, so this is minus a minus 1, okay, or negative of negative 1. B squared, here it's negative 1 squared, minus 4 times A times C is negative 1 right there as well. Now, when you work in a quadratic formula, once you have plugged in your values, do not continue. At this point, you got to stop yourself, okay? Because so many students make mistakes plugging in the values. So double, triple check that you got all these values right. And from this point forward, you're going to have to be super careful that you don't make any little arithmetic mistakes, because, how many quadratic equations problems have I graded between homework, test, and quizzes? I believe about 100 million. Okay. Now, obviously, over decades of teaching mathematics, have I really seen 100 million quadratic equation problems? No, but it's a lot. Okay. So, I'm like a machine. My eyes are like, okay, I know exactly what to do. I'm like a little advanced computer program, like, okay, I'm like that guy back in the 1970s. What was that robot guy? Bionic Man, that's the name of him. If you're not familiar with that, check out that guy, the Bionic Man. All right, so he was very cool. He had all kinds of bionic features. That's how I was, because I was grading so much work. Any teacher would relate to that. But anyways, my senses are on high alert. I know exactly where students are going to make errors. So you got to be super careful in here. All right, this is the negative 4 times 1. This is going to be positive, basically, right? That's going to be a positive 4. Negative 1 squared is 1. And then a minus 1 is 1. And then we have a plus or minus, and then 2 times 1 is 2. And now I'm kind of going quickly here. Again, you need to practice the quadratic formula. I have tons of videos on this in my algebra playlist on my channel. So 1 plus 4, that's 5. So 1 plus or minus 2. This is the final answer. Now, I said there's 2 solutions. So, hey, Mr. YouTube man, you said there's 2 solutions. This is just one answer. Well, no. The first answer, this little plus or minus, means one answer. You're going to go 1 plus the square root of 5 over 2. That's one separate number, okay? The other number is 1 minus the square root of 5 over 2. Okay, so instead of writing these 2 answers this way, what we do in mathematics is very, very common. We just combine these guys. We squish them together, and we're like, look, this is a plus, this is a minus. We'll call it a plus or minus and just write the same numbers. Okay, so that is that. Again, quadratic formulas, tons of stuff you need to know, right? About quadratic formulas, right? What they are. They're a polynomial degree too. They're always going to have 2 solutions. Sometimes we can take the square root of both sides. Sometimes we can factor, okay? But when none of these options work, we have to fall back on the quadratic formula. And again, there's this thing called completing the square, which is like the long version, but you're going to need to know how to do this as well, all right? So just a quick overview of quadratic formulas. Now, if in fact you got this problem right and you understood everything I was talking about, then I must in turn give you a happy face with a mohawk, an A+, 100%, and I'll give you a couple stars there. back in the good old 1980s, people, in fact, did have mohawks. We used quite a bit of hairspray. It was probably pretty dangerous to use that much hairspray in your hair back in those good old days. But, anyways, we thought we were cool. I guess that's every generation thinks so. But listen, that's good stuff. If you're able to do this correctly and you understand all these steps, that shows me that you're on the right road. You're taking notes. You're listening to your teacher, etc. Now, if you didn't get this right, but you learned something, you're like, okay, I learned something. This wasn't a waste of time. Well, maybe not a complete waste of time. Then please consider smashing that like button and please consider subscribing to my channel. I've been on YouTube for 10 plus years. I got over 1,000 videos organized from basic to advanced math on my channel. Okay, all that's there for you. So if you like my teaching style, then please take advantage of those videos. That's what they're there for, and I'm posting new content all the time. But my best math content, my best math help will be a part of my math help program. Again, you can find the link to my math help program by following that link in the description of this video. Okay, so with that being said, I definitely wish you all the best in your mathematics adventures. Thank you for your time and have a great day.